Kimberly Reuter, business advisor and supply chain expert, and welcome back to my podcast, The Morning Mood. Welcome back, my Moodies. And y'all not gonna believe this, but this is episode 100. Yeah, I know. Um, as always, I'm kind of clueless that this was coming. I mean, I knew I was recording a lot, but I didn't know that we had hit 100. Unfucking believable is what I'm gonna say about that. So, for those of you who are just kind of tuning in and don't know the story, I started podcasting about 3 months ago in May, I believe is when I started. And now it's right now it is September. So 3, 4 months ago. And when I originally started my podcast, it almost started kind of out of frustration, to be totally honest with you. Uh, I was in the process of trying to ramp up the keynote speaking, which worked out beautifully, and pivoting away from consulting. But I still had a lot of information to share, and I still had things I wanted to do. I had been trying to start a podcast for 5 years. I knew it was something I needed to do. It had been on and off success for a variety of reasons. And one day back in May, I just sat down and I said, I'm just going to record. I'm not going to go through all of this stuff I've been going through. Up until then, the podcast had been an hour, hour and a half. They had to be scripted, working with partners, all this stuff that was ultimately just getting in my way of making it happen. So I just sat down one day and hit record. And I didn't script it, I didn't have a plan. All I knew was that I had to get this data out, this information, this experience, this knowledge out of my head and out into the environment, out into the world. So, what is all this information I have in my head, and why did I start a podcast, and why has it been successful, by the way? By the way, we've been massively successful, in my opinion, and in the opinion of other people in the podcast industry, because I don't know. I have no fucking idea if I'm winning or losing, to be totally honest with you. So, but the feedback has been great. We have over 65,000 views on YouTube, thousands and thousands and thousands of views on LinkedIn. I'm not sure what's going on with Instagram, to be honest with you, but it's working. People are listening to the podcast, and the feedback has been amazing. So I'm going to call this a success. We made it to 100. So, what is all this knowledge and experience I just mentioned that I have in my head, and why you guys should be listening to me and what I have to say on my podcast? Well, as some of you may know, if you've been tuning in, I'm one of the pioneers of the global e commerce industry. I was hired by Amazon back in the early 2000s to build, at the time, a program that was called Timex, which was a little fledgling program that could not get off the ground that would do duty and tax calculation for customers when they bought products from a Amazon website, not in their country. Originally started with Amazon.com in the United States, and now is in Germany, UK, Japan, and the US. So, but we were the first to do duty and tax calculation at checkout for the customer. I also built Amazon's import and export program, built the entire foundation for Amazon's import and export, and then went on to build two more multi-billion dollar businesses with the FBA team. So that's three multi-billion dollar startups at Amazon, plus running all of their import, export, product, and hazmat compliance worldwide. So that in itself was a lot of responsibility, and I had a lot of experiences doing it. Prior to that, I was a licensed customs broker. I worked for a variety of different brokers, expediters, uh, Radix actually was my first. We don't talk about them much. Rogers and Brown, Kuhn and Nagel. I imported for Black and Decker, Michelin, Ford, Target. Was on site at Target for a while, way back in the day in Minnesota. Not a lot of people want to be associated with Target right now, but I still love you, baby. So I have a lot of experience. After I left Amazon, I went to Nordstrom where I spent 4 years. really helping that company try to embrace digital technology, move into the 21st century, think differently about technology and supply chain, and served as a change leader for Nordstrom for 4 years, advisor to the executive team, and overall truth speaker. After I left Nordstrom, I started my own consulting gig and did that for about almost 10 years. And don't do a lot of consulting now. I got tired of saying the same thing over and over again. I know after 9 years, I was a little disappointed with all the supply chains that I've rescued, that the problems are always the same. So just here's some free advice, y'all. If you're out there struggling with supply chain, get software. Yes, put down the Excel spreadsheet. You heard me. So that's how I got here, and in my consulting gigs, I have worked with QVC, HSN, Kmart Australia, all kinds of companies, tiny little startups, Mishima Reserve steak startup, by the owner of Beecher Cheese out of, Seattle. I worked with did a, frozen Dungeness crab startup out of Oregon. I worked with Bonafide, with pharmaceuticals. I've done everything. I have worked with all kinds of supply chains, medical, cold, hot, fast, any of it. You name it, I worked with it. So I have a lot to share. I have a lot of information, a lot of experience. I'm a big risk taker. I love to take chance. I'm always just a little bit by the seat of my pants. So I've done a lot of stuff. I've taken a lot of risk. And what inspired me to do this, what said, Kim, get on that mic and start talking, was every time I went to go to a client, every time I went out into the field, whether or not it was for a client or speaking at an event or just speaking to someone in supply chain that needed some help, every time I went out into the field, I found people struggling. I found supply chain leaders, supply chain managers, supply chain analysts, C suite struggling. And the thing that broke my heart the most was the analysts and the managers, the juniors, the littles, who were just starting out in supply chain, who didn't have mentors, who didn't have anyone educating them, who weren't teaching them best in class practices, who weren't challenging them, who weren't doing anything. And these youngins were put into these supply chain jobs because let me tell y'all something. If you haven't heard it before, I'm going to tell you again. Most companies don't give a flying fuck about their supply chain until it fucks up. And then it is all hands on deck with what's going on in supply chain. And so let me play this out for you with what happens. So companies don't care about supply chain. They put junior people in supply chain, generally with little to no experience because they're cheap. Let's be honest, they don't cost anything. That's why they do it. And they're not investing in supply chain. So they're putting the cheap people in the cheap seats. And then it goes tits up. Yep. Then we have problems. And the poor manager, analyst who's been put into this role, they think they're doing a good job. They've been doing the very best that they can. They've had no training, no education, no nothing, is suddenly in the hot seat. Yeah. And they're trying to defend themselves against tens of thousands of dollars in bills and just craziness. Okay. So it's crazy. They create a situation in these companies that is doomed to fail. Doomed to fail. And then when they fail, they blame these poor little analysts and managers who had no fucking training, no education, no idea what they're doing. They're just issuing delivery orders, trying to keep it moving, just doing anything they can to keep the freight moving. And all of a sudden, they have $100,000 problem that they didn't even know they were making happen. That is what pulled at my heartstring. That is what made me do this. Because I want all the people out there who didn't get training, who didn't get education, who didn't have support, who didn't have someone to have their back, that there's a voice out there for you. I'm speaking to you. I'm trying to help you, train you, mentor you, give you some education so that you can do a better job, so that you know what to do when somebody comes in your office and monopolizes all your time. You stand up, baby. Thank you for your time. I have work to do. Stand up. Now, I know a lot of remote workers out there don't have these problems, but you will when you go back to the office. So that's where this came from. That's why the podcast started. Did I think I was going to get to 100? This was, I wanted to get to 10. I got to 10. And then I said, I'm going to go to 100. And then we're going to see what happens. So here we are. We're at 100. So what have I learned? I do a lot of podcasts on greatest lessons. So what have I learned through this podcast? I think first and foremost is something can't take off when you don't expect it to. I did not expect this podcast to take off, as you guys know. I mean, I wanted to be successful. I didn't start something that I thought would fail, but I really didn't know where this was going to go. So I think the first and biggest lesson I learned out of all this is just do it. Just do it. Yeah. If you have had something that's been pulling at you for a while, just fucking do it. You doesn't have to be perfect. Actually, Andrew Miner, who I've had on my podcast 4 times now, he's fabulous. And you should tune into that. If you listen to him, he says something that is amazing, which is this. If you're working on something and you launch it and it's perfect, you probably waited too long. Yeah. You lost market share, somebody ate your lunch, whatever happened. It doesn't have to be perfect. So the thing I learned the most and was reinforced with the success of the podcast was just do it. If it's pulling at you, do it. Don't worry about it being perfect. Don't worry about doing it the way everyone else did it, or tells you how to do it. Because here's another thing I'm going to tell you. Everyone I have talked to after I started this podcast, everybody who has reached out to me after this podcast started, they have all said, "You record every day?" Yeah, multiple times a day, to be totally honest with you, because I have guests and they're flabbergasted that I'm able to record every day. And if I had tuned into all the advice I was getting, everything everybody had told me about podcasting, I would have never done it. I would have never done 20-minute episodes, and I never would have recorded every day because everyone would have told me it was impossible. So do it. Greatest lesson I have learned out of this podcast is do it. Do it your way. Do it with your whole heart and just do it. That is the greatest lessons I have heard, the greatest lesson I have learned out of this podcast. Second greatest lesson, lift people up. Lifting people up, lifting others up through this podcast has been one of the biggest and most rewarding thing I have done. Being able to tell other people's stories, to help them tell their story, has been the biggest gift. And by the way, those episodes perform the best, just in case you're curious. Torsten is a rock star. He doesn't even know it yet. But lifting others, sharing with others, helping others is what made this successful, is truly what made this podcast successful, was bringing others along. Lift others. Lesson number 2, lift others. Be generous. Bring people along for the ride. Don't just go reach out to people when your shit's going bad and bring them along for the shit ride. We all know that. We all have that friend, that acquaintance. You don't hear from that person until they've lost their job or some shit has hit the fan and then you're blowing you up. Be there in the good times. Bring them along for the good shit too. Okay? Lift others was my second greatest lesson out of doing this podcast. And my third lesson, and I'm going to be honest, surprised me the most. Authenticity matters. I started this podcast and I intentionally did not wanna do hair, makeup, and, like, you know, prepare myself for the podcast. I didn't wanna do it, for a variety of reasons. One, I didn't want it to get in the way of the creativity, right? I'm gonna be honest, I work in my house, I slog every day. Most of the time, I am just working. And people don't see a lot of me. Maybe they see me on a video. I have a video call every now and then, but for the most part, I'm not getting dressed up every day and putting my shit together. And then if any of you ever work for me in corporate or work with me in corporate or knew me in corporate, you know that the makeup is negotiable. Nordstrom, it was a everyday thing, but that was part of that culture. But at Amazon, we had good hair days and we had good makeup days, but we never had both. So most of the reason I did it was because I didn't want it to get in the way of the creativity. I didn't want it to get in the way of recording. I live kind of fast and loose. I don't know what's going to happen every day. And if I have to stop and do hair and makeup, I'm not going to sit down and record. But there was a deeper reason. And I think there was a deeper reason that I didn't even realize at the time because it wasn't like a laziness thing. Like, I don't want to do my makeup. It was, I'm not doing makeup. I am not going to do it. Like, it was part of the core ethos of this podcast. And at the time, I didn't realize what I was saying or doing. I just knew I had to do it this way. And it was about being authentic. I knew that I wanted to focus on the message, on the information, on the knowledge, on the data, on the things that I wanted to share. That is what mattered to me. That's the juice, the nugget. That's it. The rest of it is fluff. The background, the colors, the lights, the la la la, the filters, all that is shit. It's all shit. And I didn't want anyone to come into my podcast and one, see the same stuff. See all the same supply chain podcasts. There's a few out there. They ain't that great, but they're pretty. They're beautiful. They have nice color coordination and all that stuff. And they have maybe 25 episodes, 24 episodes, whatever. They do one a month, one a week, but they're beautiful. But I've listened to them. I don't think they really have anything interesting to say, to be honest with you. I mean, there's some consultants and they got some consultant shit to say. And there's some educators and they got some education shit to say. But there weren't a lot of people out there who had been muddy for years, for decades, in the trenches. Not in the trenches when I was 17 when I started, been in the fucking trenches the whole time. Fighting, building, inventing. Very few people have that experience and continue to be that, continue to want to be in that space. I don't sit at a C suite because I can't fucking sit still and I can't keep my mouth shut. Straight up. That's it. I've gotten so close, but I will call a motherfucker out, and you know it. And if you've been on the receiving end on that, especially if you're a C-suite and you've been on the receiving end of that, it don't feel good. They do not like to be called out on their bullshit ever. But I'm a truth teller, baby. And that's what I do. And that's my value. And when I bought that to this podcast, sparks flew. It's about being authentic. It is about bringing your experience and your knowledge and your struggles to the podcast, to be real, to connect. I did not realize when I started this podcast that is what would be the connection, that the authenticity, the honesty, the transparency, the struggle would be the connection. Because I've been there. I have been there. I have been there recently. I have been at the desk with the manager who had no supply chain experience, struggling to figure out why they were losing $250,000 a month on fucking supply chain. And I'm not even talking about this ocean freight crazy bullshit. I'm talking about demurrage and detention and all kinds of customs exams and craziness. This poor boy had been at it for like 3 years. He had no fucking idea what he was doing. And you know what? The whole company was blaming him for it. Mhm. And that's when the C-suite and I lock horns because it's not his fault. You didn't train him. You didn't support him. You didn't educate him. And now you want to blame him. That is what other podcasts aren't talking about. The authenticity, the honesty. I have been there. I continue to be in the trenches. I love the trenches. That's where I want to be. I want to be building up people, managers, analysts, helping you be better and stronger. And even if you're a VP or C-suite, because let's be honest, a lot of you have gotten up there and you still don't know what the hell you're doing. This is for you too. But the biggest thing I learned out of this was being authentic matters and people want it. I've always been an authentic fool, and you know it. If you've ever been around me, I have said some stuff, done some stuff that people are like, holy shit, there she goes. But it was honest. But I never realized until I did this podcast that that's what connects you with people. So my Moody's, we made it to 100. Didn't see it coming. So greatest lessons out of my 100? Lifting others. Your hive. Be there for your hive. Authenticity matters more than anything. It really, really, really does. I would say out of everything I have learned, out of everything in this podcast, the authenticity is what mattered the most, is what drove the podcast forward, was that authenticity. And the biggest lesson, and the one I want you to walk away from, if you walk away from just one of the three, is just do it. Don't wait for the perfect moment, the perfect time, the perfect partner, the perfect whatever. There is no perfect. Just go do it. Just try it and see what happens. Nothing is written in stone. You can always make it better. Just do it. All right, my muties, we made it to 100. So what's up next? Yeah, okay. So hey, we're not going to just quit at 100. What's up next? You're going to see some changes coming. Yep. Nothing drastic. Now that I've proven I can get into 100, now I'm going to start playing with that brand stuff that I told y'all can't do until you get something that's meaningful. And now I feel like I have something that's meaningful. So we're going to see some changes. It's going to be fluffy stuff and pretty stuff. I'm still not doing hair and makeup though, but there's going to be some changes and you're going to see more of me and more of my guests. So thank you for being there. All of you, all 65,000 of you. It means a lot to me. We made it to 100. All right, y'all. Peace out.